Below the knee prosthesis, any lock, we want the lock to be on the inside of the leg. And that's so it's easier when they're trying to lock or unlock to get to the mechanism. When we laminate, we want to use a separator. Usually we use a PVA bag. PVA bag you want to moisten so that you can conform it and stretch it over the mold. And so we have our dummy. It's going to be towards the medial side, and then we'll bag it and start the lamination process. So I have our PVA bag that's moistened on the cast, and what I'm doing is I'm pulling it down, and if you can see, it's not black here, but it's black here. That means that it's getting tight on the dummy. And so what I want to do is start to trim it, then I'm going to dry it, pull it down a little bit, and then tape it off. When I dry it, it's going to pull the PVA bag into the dummy. And it'll also be much easier to tape off. Alright, then we'll just cut it. And now I'm going to pull it down. And I want to pull it down by the slot. And I'm taking my time. So there we go. Looks good. And so now I'm going to trim it with a razor. Always. Okay, so I'm trimming this down just below the slot, because that will let me tape it off to the dummy. And right now I'm just trimming the excess off. And I'm not cutting very hard because I want the dummy to stay nice. So when you tape off the PVA bag, it's good to use the clear PVC tape. If you use the black tape, it melts and then you get black inside the lamination. This doesn't show up as much. So I'll go ahead and take this off. And I'm not using a lot of tape. I want to make sure it seals nice. And then around the slot, I will trim it just a little bit above it. Because what that'll let me do is when I put the slot dummy in, it'll pull in. So with the slot dummy, I put Teflon tape on it. Get the whole thing covered. So I covered up where it's going to be laminated so that I could pull the dummy out easier. So I tucked the tape under, and then I can stick it into the slot. Okay, so that's covered. I'm going to trim off the excess tape. And I'll just tape off my bag. So now I have set screws into the dummy threaded holes, and we want to make sure that the screws don't get filled with resin. So we want to put some petroleum jelly on the threads. One thing you'll notice is I have pieces of foam in the heads. And what that's going to do, it's going to allow the plate that we're going to use to eventually just float on the heads, and the foam will line up the plate. It'll also keep the resin out of the head, so that when we do take the plate off, we just remove the foam, I can get to the inside of the hex head. One of the things I'm doing now is I put the nylon on, and I got the scissors and just cut the thread of the nylon, just like get the cap screws back in. Because if you don't, it'll twirl it and stick and pull it in. And the nylon is only there just to keep the NSP from sticking to the PVA bag. And so here's the foam. We're putting the foam back in. Foam plug. Now we're ready for the NSP. So we want to get some thread so that we could tie it off. So this is about half. We can start to tie it off, or you can tie it off later. So let's get this started. I know this is about halfway. And we want to start feeding the screws through. Get the cap screws to come through. Alright, there we go. So this size B cam probably is a 4-inch. I think this is a 6-inch. So we want to work the screws through. We also want to work the slot through. Just like that. So when we make the knot, we don't have to make the knot really tight. We can make it loose so that the fibers spread out. Otherwise we're going to have a lot of material in the middle. And then we put our gloves. I like to tie the 9 glass because then I can pull it back up and it won't come off. Because we don't want too much 9 glass. And then we can start applying our strips. And so for sticking the I-beam on, we're going to use double stick tape. So I just apply the double stick tape. And I can apply it on. And I want it to fall between the screws. So the way I made these I-beams, I have stockinette, 9 glass, with the NSP running through, and it's sewn in the middle, so when I stretch it, I can pull it and it'll keep the NSP centered. Tape.
Oh, you just want to pull on Dacron, huh?
So for the NSP tape, we want the tape to run in this direction. Up and down. Around the brim, we want it to run in this direction. Okay, so down here we have it tied off, so that's going to make it a little harder to run the tape. We do want to try to keep it in one piece, so what we can do is split it. We split the tape.
Not every week, but lately it's like it's going every
Then
other.
we can run the braid
Like
through.
once a quarter.
Okay, now we can reflect this back down. exposing the heads.
Take my first one.
Good man.
Sick.
All that time you don't get one?
Yeah, I was trying to get it perfect.
Right here. I think we got that down. Right. And you have to focus, right? Focus, you got the seat. You have to be open. See the deep grip right there. So this is reverse, not like the other one. That's the weird way. This one looks like this.
Yep.
That's right there. This is the face. The face right there. This one is black. That's here. This is nice. This is the face. You can have these focusing against.
It might be easier to keep the slot retained. You can tie it.
You do this way. This one is going to be against wherever it goes. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it. This one slap it like this. This one is a hole. So with this one is smooth. Nothing is there. With the face. You can feel the face.
We just want to make sure the fabric doesn't come back and close it.
Yes, you cannot. The idea is don't go to the other side. That's up to there. You put your strap. So if you push your strap, that's going to stay there. Otherwise, if you put it like that, you put a strap, you see goes like this. You cannot put a strap. This is a new invention. This way, not too rapid. This way. But make sure this is a long one. That's fine. The longer one first.
Foam.
I don't think so. You should use over for us.
Alright, so now we have our nylon. I trimmed some holes for the foam. The slot's covered, but that's okay. So we're going to put the plate on. We want these up. So the foam will keep it from moving. This will give us a flat surface. and home. Yeah, the plastic bag.
Mm-hmm.
Can you stretch it back out if you shrink it?
Well, you don't hit it on top. Should be alright. That might be a problem.
So this one I'm just drying the bag because the resin is so thick
Mm-hmm.
and the bag was sitting for so long. I don't want it to pop. So I'm just going to dry the bag a little bit. So rule of thumb, thinner and the thicker. Thinner and thicker.
Why is that?
You'll be here all day waiting for the thicker to go into the thinner. So because it's so thick, I definitely want to scrape it off the wall. And off the bottom.
What's the ratio for the thinner one and the thicker one?
60% thick, 40% thinner. It just takes so long to mix it. All right. So you can see how it's coming in. So this way the holes, the resin is coming in through the hole and it's letting the air come out. one, since it's so thick, I'm gonna help it a little bit.
What if you squeeze it too hard and the PVA bag breaks?
Well, then you have to tape the whole. Oh, so you always have to tape around. So I want to come on this side. Even if the holes don't line up, it's okay because the foam gets squished. Alright, so we can start working it now. So if the bag is too wet, it could also stretch out when you're pushing the resin in. And because with epoxy, it likes to go where there's a low pressure. So what'll happen is it'll get a lot of resin where there's negative pressure. So that's why you want to keep it moving. So you can tell where it's saturating and where it's not. So right here it's still not wet. So I'm just gonna work it in a little bit. Work it in as I go. What's that? Yep. Alright, so we have our resin that's cured. Well, it's hard. So now we're going to start disassembling the lamination. And first thing I want to do is cut this off. Cut this cap off. Now one of the things that would make it easier is if I had taped it off, it would separate much easier. Plus now we have the plastic dummy.
Mm-hmm.
It will separate much easier.
Why it is?
It doesn't stick to the metal.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, took this off. Came off a little easier because we had it in the oven at 150 degrees for about 10 minutes. So it softened up the resin. So if we look, we can actually see the foam pieces that were in the cap screws. Get a different blade. That's another reason why the plastic would be easier.
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
你说把这个
So now we can see the foam pieces for the cap screws. And what I'm going to do is, for these pieces that are sticking up, just sand it flat. And then I'll sand this part out so I could take the dummy out. I just want to get this exposed, get the heads exposed, and then we're ready to go ahead and separate it. Okay, so we have Teflon around this dummy adapter. If we don't put Teflon on it, it'll be much harder to come out. So there you have it. So sometimes you might get some resin in there and you might not be able to get the wrench on there. You can clean it out, or you can also put putty inside of the screw head besides the Plastizote. So we'll just clean these out and then get the screws out. Okay? There we go. So now we're just going to remove the screws. So since we have Vaseline on it, the screws are fine. Okay, so now we just have to take out the rest. Okay. So I put the screws back in a little bit, and the reason for that is after I knock the socket off, I want to be able to take the dummy out. So I'm going to knock the socket off. You can see how the dummies stayed in place. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and hit this to knock the dummy out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around, but I'm going to start crosswise. And then I'm going to back the screw out till the dummy gets knocked out.
It just takes time.
Takes time, and you know, once you do it once, it's like, oh, okay, that's not so hard. So what helps is there you go.